Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving headfirst into today's top cybersecurity news.
Yeah, we're cutting through the noise and getting straight to what matters.
So what's caught your attention today? What's making waves out there?
Well, sometimes the most ordinary things can spark some pretty big questions about security.
Oh, like what? Give me an example.
Well, Troy Hunt, the security researcher, he was talking about this in his weekly update. He's renovating his house, right?
Okay, yeah.
And he was struggling with something we probably all take for granted, choosing light switches.
Light switches, seriously.
Yeah, because now you've got these smart options all connected to the internet and everything. Makes you think twice.
Right. Smart homes always sounded kind of cool, but also a little creepy, like how much is too much connectedness?
Exactly. And that leads right into a story that really caught my eye today. It's about a backdoor.
Oh, a back door. Where?
In two popular patient monitors, the Context CMS 8000 and the Epsem MN 120.
Patient monitors. You mean in
Yeah.
hospitals and stuff?
Yep. Used all over the US and Europe, actually, though they're made in China.
Wow. So what's the deal with this back door?
Well, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, they discovered it. Seems it's transmitting patient data
Transmitting it where?
to a server. Seems like it might belong to a university.
So someone could be spying on patient data. That's scary. How does it even work?
Basically, it allows remote code execution. Someone could control the device from anywhere, and it leaks patient data. The really concerning part is there are no integrity checks or version tracking, which means it was meant to be hidden.
Wow, that is really worrying. So what can hospitals do? Is there a fix?
Unfortunately, as of today, February 1st, 2025, no patch.
So they're just vulnerable.
The FDA is recommending disconnecting the devices from the internet for now, sticking to local monitoring only.
That's a Band-Aid solution. This is a much bigger issue, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
not just about these two specific devices.
Absolutely. It raises concerns about all sorts of connected devices in healthcare, from infusion pumps to electronic health records. The whole system is potentially at risk.
It's a chilling reminder that cybersecurity impacts more than just our computers and phones. It could have life or death consequences. Speaking of vulnerabilities, there was also that Apple zero-day exploit in the news today, CVE 2025-24085.
Oh, yeah, that one's nasty. Targeted iPhones through malicious web content.
And people wouldn't even know.
It was being exploited before Apple even knew about it.
Yikes. So iPhone users were completely exposed.
That's the danger with 0 days. It's a race against time to patch them before they're exploited.
It's wild how sophisticated these attacks are becoming. And it's not just big companies being targeted either.
You're right. Individuals, especially journalists, activists, anyone who might have sensitive information, they're being targeted with spyware. Remember that Paragon spyware?
That was targeting journalists through WhatsApp, wasn't it?
Yep. Meta actually disrupted that campaign back in December.
It's crazy to think even our messaging apps can be compromised. What's the motivation behind targeting journalists specifically?
Well, they often have access to sensitive information. Their work can be seen as a threat by some.
So silencing dissent, basically.
Or gathering intelligence, disrupting investigations.
That's pretty chilling. It's not just about data anymore. It's about controlling information. Speaking of control, what about that Beyond Trust breach? Ironic, isn't it?
A cybersecurity company getting breached? Yeah, a bit.
What happened there?
Compromised API key, exposed 17 of their SaaS customers.
So even the security experts aren't immune.
Exactly. And it highlights how crucial API security is. APIs are often the gateway to sensitive data and systems. If they're not secured, they're a goldmine for attackers.
It's like finding a flaw in the armor of a knight. Speaking of big targets, let's talk about ransomware. It seems like every day there's another company getting hit.
It's definitely a growing problem. Tata Technologies, an Indian multinational, got hit just today, forced them to suspend all their IT services.
And it's not just companies, right? The New York Blood Center got hit recently, too.
Yeah, it's scary to think what could happen if a hospital's entire system was held hostage. Disrupts essential services.
These attackers are getting bolder all the time.
And more sophisticated. Security Affairs reported this new trend, ESXi ransomware attacks using SSH tunneling.
SSH tunneling. That sounds pretty techy. What does it mean for the average person?
Well, it's basically a way for attackers to create a hidden backdoor. Makes it harder to detect and remove the ransomware.
So you might think you've cleaned up an infection, but it could still be lurking there.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we need to be proactive, not reactive, when it comes to cybersecurity.
We need to be one step ahead of these guys. Well, I think this is a good place to pause. We'll be back after a short break to continue this deep dive into today's cybersecurity news.
Before the break, we were talking about how even cybersecurity firms like Beyond Trust, they're not immune to attacks.
Yeah, it's a real wake-up call. No one is completely safe.
Definitely not. And you know, that Beyond Trust thing really brings up a critical point. API security.
APIs? Honestly, that sounds a little over my head.
Yeah, it can get pretty technical, but think of APIs like messengers.
Messengers, okay.
Yeah. They allow different applications to talk to each other.
So like when I use my Facebook login for a shopping website, something like that.
Exactly. That's an API in action. But the thing is, they can be a way in for attackers, too.
Oh, I see. How so?
APIs often connect to really sensitive data, important systems. If a company doesn't secure them properly, well, hackers can get in.
So like leaving a backdoor wide open.
Pretty much. And that's what happened with Beyond Trust. That compromised API key gave the attackers access to all that customer data.
17 customers, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What can companies do to prevent that kind of thing?
A few things. Strong authentication is key, and authorization mechanisms, so you know exactly who's accessing what. Then regularly audit those APIs, look for weaknesses, and apply security patches fast.
So layers of protection and staying proactive.
You got it. And it's not just on the companies either. If you're listening and you're using apps that rely on APIs, you got to be careful too. Choose providers you trust, know their security practices, and keep an eye out for any news about vulnerabilities.
Shared responsibility then.
Yeah.
Companies build secure APIs, and we, the users, got to be informed.
Exactly. Switching gears a bit, let's talk spyware. This hits a lot closer to home for a lot of folks.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier, the Paragon spyware targeting journalists through WhatsApp. Didn't even think about that possibility.
It's scary stuff. And journalists aren't the only ones at risk. Anyone could be targeted, especially if you're dealing with sensitive info.
So how would you even know? What are some warning signs?
Well, watch out for unusual battery drain on your phone, for one, or data usage that just doesn't make sense. If your device is suddenly slow or apps are acting weird, that could be a sign too.
Okay, so performance issues. Anything else?
Sometimes you can even hear it. Strange noises during calls, or if your microphone or camera seem to be on when they shouldn't be, that's a red flag for sure.
That's creepy. So what do you do if you think you've got spyware?
First thing, disconnect from the internet. Then, run a full scan with some good anti-malware software. If it's still there, you might need to do a factory reset.
Like a digital detox forced on you.
Sometimes that's what it takes. And speaking of things that can really mess up your digital life, let's get back to ransomware.
We talked about Tata Technologies, the New York Blood Center. It feels like these attacks are just nonstop these days.
It's a huge problem. And it's not just about the money anymore either.
What do you mean?
They're stealing data before they encrypt it, using it as leverage, basically.
So they lock up your data and then threaten to expose it if you don't pay.
Yep, double the pressure. And remember that new tactic we talked about, the ESXi ransomware using SSH tunneling?
Right, the hidden backdoor thing.
It's a nightmare scenario. So yeah, backups are super important, but you need to be smart about your cybersecurity practices in general. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, be careful about clicking on things.
The basics, but so important.
And be wary of phishing scams and social engineering. These guys are clever. They'll try to trick you into giving them what they want.
So it's a combination of technology and human behavior then.
It is. And that brings us to another threat that really plays on human psychology. Malvertising.
Malvertising? I don't think I've heard of that.
It's basically malware spread through online advertising.
Like those fake Google ads we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They're often disguised as legitimate ads on reputable sites.
So even if you're on a site you trust, you could still be at risk.
Yep. They can be hard to spot, too. That's why ad blockers can be a good line of defense.
It's kind of disturbing to think that even ads can be weaponized. What else can we do to protect ourselves? It feels like a never-ending battle.
It can feel that way, for sure. One thing that really helps is a password manager.
Password manager.
Yeah, it creates and stores strong, unique passwords for all your accounts. Keeps them safe.
Makes sense. I can never remember those complex passwords anyway.
And enable two-factor authentication whenever you can.
I've heard that can be a bit of a pain to set up, though.
It's an extra step, for sure, but it's worth it for the added security. And honestly, one of the best things you can do is just stay informed. Read about the latest threats, the best practices. Knowledge is power, right?
So educated and empowered. I like that.
Cybersecurity doesn't have to be about fear. It's about understanding the risks and taking steps to protect yourself.
Well said. We've covered a lot today. Hopefully our listeners are feeling more informed about the cybersecurity landscape and what they can do to stay safe.
I hope so too. It's an ongoing journey, but we can do it.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into cybersecurity.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, stay safe out there. Until next time. We've talked about a lot of specific threats, things individuals and companies need to watch out for. But I'm curious about the bigger picture. What kind of trends are you seeing in cybersecurity overall?
One of the biggest things is just how sophisticated these attacks are getting. It's not just random hacking anymore.
Yeah, it feels like a different level now.
It is. We're seeing these highly targeted attacks, well-funded, often backed by, nation states or organized crime.
So it's not just some kid in your basement anymore.
Nope. These attackers are using cutting-edge stuff. Artificial intelligence, machine learning. They're finding ways to get around traditional security.
It's kind of unsettling, like an arms race.
That's a good way to put it. It's a constant race to stay ahead. We need to be proactive.
So where do you see cybersecurity heading? In the near future, I mean.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, that's the interesting part. Cybersecurity and AI, they're starting to merge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, AI can be used to analyze tons of data, find anomalies, even automate threat responses.
So AI can be both the problem and the solution.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool, but we need to be careful how we use it. We got to understand the risks.
Makes you think.
Hmm.
What about the human element? That's a big factor too, right? People making mistakes.
Absolutely. That's why security awareness training is so important.
Yeah. Educate people about the risks.
Help them make smarter choices online. It's about creating a culture of cybersecurity where everyone understands their role.
Not just about the tech then. It's about behavior.
It is. Critical thinking, healthy skepticism, those are important skills in the digital world.
A holistic approach then, combining tech, education, and human behavior.
Exactly. It's a complex challenge, and it requires a comprehensive response.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I have to admit, I'm feeling a little bit of both, urgency and optimism.
I get it. The threats are definitely real, and they're changing all the time. But there's also this growing awareness. More and more people are taking cybersecurity seriously.
And we have experts like you working to protect us.
Well, we're all in this together, really.
So if there's one thing you want our listeners to take away from this, what would it be?
That cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. We all have a part to play in making the digital world safer.
Well said. Thanks for joining us today on The Deep Dives. We hope you found it informative and hopefully empowering.
It was my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, stay safe out there in the digital world. Until next time.